all of his incredible work with the task force. And then I'll share a little bit about the Japanese American redress and reparations experience. And then at the end, we'll open up for questions. Quick bio on Jean-Pierre. Sorry, I just pulled this from the website. Jean-Pierre Brutus is a senior counsel in the Economic Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, where he leads the Institute's reparations advocacy. He was a member of the Reparations Narrative Lab and represented the Institute as a community fellow on the Rutgers Newark Crafting Democratic Futures Project on community dialogues on reparations. And prior to joining the Institute, Jean-Pierre worked at Legal Services NYC, where he represented Bronx tenants facing eviction as part of New York City's Right to Counsel program. He's a graduate of Georgetown University and earned his PhD in African American Studies and JD from Northwestern University. So with that, I will hand it over to Jean-Pierre. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for having me. And I just want to thank Danielle. I'd like to thank Amber. I'd like to thank Jeff and AAPI New Jersey for having me this afternoon. I'm really excited to be here as part of this series. And I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to come and learn about some of the work that's going on with New Jersey Reparations Council. For those of you that may not know, the Institute is an organization located in Newark, New Jersey, which is actually our 25th year anniversary. We've been around since 1999. And the Institute's cutting edge racial and social justice advocacy seeks to empower people of color by building reparative systems that create wealth, transform justice, and harness democratic power from the ground up here in New Jersey. And I'm happy here to speak today about the work that we've been doing on reparations, both in the Institute and our work in the Council. So I want to give you a little bit of background about the Council, but in order to give you that context, I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that we did in organizing and trying to establish a reparations task force here in New Jersey. So in November of 2019, the Institute, along with other organizations and individuals throughout the state of New Jersey, we organized and we had a press conference to introduce a bill that would study the issue of reparations for slavery and its aftermath here in New Jersey. That bill was introduced in November 2019. We got a number of co-sponsors. The prime sponsor of the bill is Assemblywoman Javonda Sumter, who is the primary sponsor and is the head of the Legislative Black Caucus here in New Jersey. That was 3 months before California, in February of 2020, introduced their bill. Now, this was several months before the murder of George Floyd. You know, that summer after George Floyd's murder, there was obviously that uprising around racial justice, a lot of interest, and California was able to get their bill passed in September of 2020. New Jersey, unfortunately, the bill was not able to move. And part of that, it was because there was this kind of hesitancy or roadblock from leadership, you know, asking why reparations in New Jersey? Why focus on this? Why use the phrase? You know, they said to my colleagues, why not use the phrase Black Lives Matter? Or why not use the phrase wealth disparity? Anything but reparations. And so my colleagues were like, you know, we need to focus on reparations and we don't want to run away from the phrase. We want to say the word. And our coalition took up the name of Say the Word Reparations to destigmatize, to normalize, to get people comfortable with the term, right? We want to be specific about the harms, and we just want to be specific about the cure and the resolution, which is reparations. And, you know, why reparations in New Jersey? I think that's a nice way of talking a little bit about the history of New Jersey, right? That question from legislators, particularly leadership, about why the need for reparations is a reflection of the kind of lack of awareness or knowledge about the specificity of slavery, of Jim Crow and segregation, and of ongoing institutional racism in New Jersey. And I think, you know, I want to start off with a number. I think some of you are probably familiar with this number because it's so stark, it's so significant. And that number is 300,000. I'm going to say that number once again, 300,000. That is the racial wealth gap in New Jersey between white households in New Jersey and Black households in New Jersey. One of the largest, if not the largest, racial wealth gap in New Jersey. Also, New Jersey has one of the largest adult disparities in incarceration of 12 to 1, as well as youth disparities in incarceration between Black and white um, young people at 18 to 1. It has one of the highest maternal mortality rates between Black women and white women at 3 to 1. These inequalities, right? These stark inequalities, we can draw a straight line from slavery in New Jersey to the present. And some of you may be saying, oh, slavery in New Jersey. For those of you that grew up in New Jersey, I would ask you rhetorically, did you learn about slavery in New Jersey when you were growing up and taking classes in school? When you were learning about history and the history of New Jersey, did you learn about slavery in New Jersey? I suspect not, given that in other presentations I've given to young people who grew up in New Jersey in the 21st century, you would think that they would be exposed to and learn about slavery in New Jersey. And those students who came after the passing of the Homicide Commission did not learn about slavery in New Jersey, which is, quite stunning to be, in fact. And so what's so significant about slavery in New Jersey? Why is it such a big deal? And why is reparations needed? Why is it so important? Well, as some historians have called New Jersey, the slave state of the North. And what do they mean by that? They mean that New Jersey was so deeply entrenched in slavery, it was so deeply a part of New Jersey's history that New Jersey was a slave society. It wasn't just a society that had slaves, but slavery was key to its existence. In the enslavement of trafficking of Africans to New Jersey was a key part of New Jersey's existence, culturally, politically, socially. Or to put it another way, slavery was mainstream in New Jersey. So when New Jersey was first founded as a colony, and when the British took it over from the Dutch, they wanted to incentivize slavery. So they created a sort of a bifurcated system of appropriating land on a racial basis, in the sense that those colonizers who came to colonize New Jersey were incentivized to come to New Jersey by given 150 acres of land. And then for each additional enslaved person that they came with, were given an additional 100, up to an additional 150 acres of land. Many of these enslaved people came from Barbados to New Jersey as the British took over, because the British had already previously colonized Barbados and wanted to bring enslavement to New Jersey. And because of this and this kind of rapid rise of slavery in New Jersey, you begin to see that by the mid 18th century, the 1700s, mid 1700s, enslaved labor became the primary form of labor in New Jersey. By 1830, of the northern enslaved population, of the enslaved population in the north, 2/3 of those people resided in New Jersey. New Jersey was the only northern state to support the Federal Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. It made it easier for white masters to recapture self-emancipated formerly enslaved people. It denied them the right of habeas corpus, trial by jury, and the ability to testify, and resulted in the reenslavement of many Black people in the North for years. In 1821, 36 years before the infamous Dred Scott decision, in which the Supreme Court Chief Justice said that Black people had no rights which a white man was bound to respect, right? In a state court, Supreme Court in New Jersey, in a case called Gibbons versus Morse, the court found that the assumed status of a Black person in New Jersey was that of an enslaved person. So if you saw an enslaved person in New Jersey, or if you saw a Black person in New Jersey, you should assume that they were an enslaved person, regardless of whether they were actually free or not. Slavery was part and parcel of New Jersey's society. It was the last state in the North to abolish slavery. It only adopted the 13th Amendment after it had been ratified by the U.S. Congress. During the Civil War in Newark, the factories and produced the uniforms for the Confederate Army, right? New Jersey businesses profited from slavery in the South as well, not just from slavery in New Jersey. And then New Jersey, and to give you a reflection of how deeply entrenched slavery was in New Jersey, is to look at the slave codes, the laws, the rules, the regulations that governed enslaved people. those slave codes were more reflective of Southern states in their harshness and their draconian nature than they were of New England societies. That gives you a sense of how dependent New Jersey was on slavery. And, after the end of slavery, it wasn't just, unfettered freedom for Black people in New Jersey. New Jersey and the rest of the United States reorganized itself around white supremacy by other means. So you began to see the institution of things like the cottager system in New Jersey, which is an early form of sharecropping. You even saw separate and unequal accommodations like Jim Crow, racially restrictive covenants, redlining, right? All these ways to exclude and to govern New Jersey's Black population. And even when the federal government passed universal programs designed to address inequality, like, for example, the GI Bill, where you had a lot of Black veterans go fight in World War II to fight for the double V, the victory abroad against fascism, and then the victory abroad here against Jim Crow. Many of them were eligible for the GI Bill. So of the 67,000 veterans of World War II in northern New Jersey and New York who were eligible for the GI Bill, less than 100 of them who were Black received those benefits. Right? And the GI Bill is responsible for essentially creating the modern middle class, and as some have noted, the white middle class. Right? And then even afterwards, we have ongoing institutional racism here in New Jersey, as demonstrated by all the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning, at the top. And you can see that line from slavery, Jim Crow / segregation, and then the current moment that we're in now. And so, we had organized and asked for the New Jersey legislature to pass a task force bill to study this issue and to look at the history of these harms, the current day harms, and then to come up with reparative solutions, right? Based in reparations to repair these harms. No movement from the legislature. In that time, the New York legislature passed a bill to study the issue of reparations. And just this past December, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, signed the bill, and the New York Reparations Task Force is about to launch. We've also seen a plethora of task forces around the country, in Boston, in St. Louis, in Detroit, in Atlanta, in Asheville, in San Francisco, all over the country. There are task forces popping up to study reparations, right? And yet New Jersey, the state, can't have it, right? Even though there have been 20 cities here in New Jersey that have passed resolutions in support of a task force bill. So rather than wait, for the legislature to do the right thing, we here at the Institute decided that we would convene our own task force called New Jersey Reparations Council. You can go to njreparationscouncil.org. And as my colleague, our president and CEO, Ryan Haygood, says, in the midst of the George Floyd murder, so many of the conversations around how to address Black life in the US always revolved around harm reduction. As he pointed out, you have big harm and then small solutions, right? The solutions did not match the size and the scale of the harm. It was always cutting around the edges. With the New Jersey Reparations Council, we're taking a different tact. We're taking a more affirmative approach. And I think that history of big harm, small approach, small solution, small repair has a long-standing history. And I just want to invoke the great W.B. Du Bois. And in his book, The Souls of Black Folk, Du Bois is born in Massachusetts. He spends a lot of time in the North, but then he travels down to the South to go to school and to teach. And in his travels in the South, he would get this question in 1903 constantly. Du Bois is the first Black person to receive a PhD from Harvard, which he received in 1896. And in the book, Souls of Black Folk, he talks about how he would get a constant question from, the white people that he saw in the South. And they would ask him this question: how does it feel to be a problem? And his response was, seldom a word, right? That kind of approach, the Negro problem approach, where the Black people are problematized and the systems, the structures that put Black people in those places are not engaged with, not scrutinized. That has marked a lot of sort of task forces where you have this kind of harm reduction approach as opposed to the thinking the approach that the council is taking. And the fundamental question animating the New Jersey Reparations Council is, what does it take for Black people to be free in New Jersey? And by taking that approach, we have restructured, what kinds of solutions, what kind of repair will come out of this council. And so the purpose of this council is to identify present-day harms, give a history of those harms, and then come up with reparative programs and policies that are commensurate with those harms to fundamentally answer the question, what does it take for Black people to be free, to provide a blueprint for New Jersey and for the rest of the country, and to realize a genuine multiracial democracy here in New Jersey. Right? Part of the purpose of reparations is to repair the harms of slavery, but one of the harms of slavery is also the failure to realize a multiracial democracy. And that's the purpose, part of the purpose of reparations and the work that we're doing at the council. So the council is made up of 9 committees. It's co-chaired by Khalil Gibran Muhammad from Harvard University, the Harvard Kennedy School, and Tasha Henderson from Rutgers University, who is the dean of the graduate school and also professor of law at the law school. We've got 9 committees, including the history of slavery in New Jersey. We've also have segregation. We also have public education and narrative, economic justice, democracy, public safety and justice, health equity, environmental justice, faith and Black resistance. Now, each committee will write a chapter, which we put together in a narrative report that would be released in June of 2025, a final report with recommendations. Up to that time, each committee will host a virtual public session. So far, we've had 4. You can see all the previous 4 on our website, njreparationscouncil.org. They've been hosted by the Slavery in New Jersey Committee, Segregation, Faith and Black Resistance, and our Health Equity. The next one coming up will be our Public Safety and Justice on April 17th. These are all virtual, and we would like the public to provide public comment for 3 minutes, and also on our website, if folks want to express themselves in various ways, they could do so. And so that's the work of the council. The council also will hold 2 in-person public events. There'll be one on Juneteenth of this year at the NJ Performing Arts Center in Newark. That'll be on Juneteenth on Wednesday in the evening. It'll be in person. It's free and open to the public. It will be streamed live by NJPBS. It will be hosted by the journalist Jelani Cobb. So we look forward to that. And at that public event, the committees that have so far provided public sessions will talk about their work to date. And then we'll also have another public event on Juneteenth of 2025 to talk about the recommendations from our council. And so the council is in the midst of doing their work, doing their research, producing ideas, examining the harms, and we're seeking reparations for slavery, reparations for Jim Crow, and ongoing institutional racism. So over 3 periods of harm. And we're looking at a harm vastly, and we're thinking about reparations comprehensively. We're including financial compensation, direct cash payments, yes. We're also thinking about investments in Black communities throughout the state. And we're also thinking about reparative policy solutions, rule changes, policies, programs to empower Black people and to repair the harms, right? We want to ensure that the harms can never happen again. We want to make sure the harms end. And then we want to make sure that we commensurately repair the harms. We want, if there are big harms, big repair. And so we want to realize that eventual goal of, ensuring Black people are free, because as we've seen historically, when the U.S. centers Black folks in a way that addresses the harms, like in Reconstruction or the Civil Rights Movement, it has profound effects that are positive for all people in the U.S. And that's important, right? Slavery is specific to Black people, but by repairing the harms, it has a profound effect on other people, right? Slavery was a way of undermining American democracy, undermining American citizenship, limiting people's participation in this democracy. And by repairing those harms, it's going to have profound and important effects. And so we take a very comprehensive approach about reparations. We have multiple avenues that we're going to pursue, yes, including individualized cash payments, but also investments. As King called for a Marshall Plan for Black America, we will also call for a Marshall Plan for Black New Jersey, right? That level of investment is important. So I'll leave it there. That's the work of the council. And thank you. I look forward to your questions, and thank you so much for taking time out of your lunchtime today for listening to the work that we're doing. I'll pass it over back to Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Pierre, for sharing all of the incredible work that the council is doing. I dropped a link to that in the chat box so folks can make sure they take a look at some of the work there. Yeah, one thing that I think is always resonating with you when I hear you talk about this, Jean-Pierre, is that I also never learned about the history of slavery in New Jersey. I went to public elementary and middle school here, and even though the Amistad curriculum was passed in 2002, I believe, it was never something that I learned until I heard it from you an event a few years ago. So thank you for sharing all of that and continuous work. I'm here to share a little bit about the Japanese American process of redress and reparations because we, as a community, did actually receive that from the federal government. So just as some background, during World War II, about 120,000 Japanese Americans were rounded up along the the West Coast, and placed in detention centers and incarceration camps until the end of the war. My grandmother and grandfather their families were part of that. My grandmother was 12 when she was placed in a camp with her family in Tule Lake and in Minidoka, which are in California and in Idaho. And so she spent a few years there of her youth, and she never really talked about her experiences there. And I'd also actually want to have a conversation with her about that. But she passed away in 2012 or 2017. And when we were cleaning out her house, we actually found a folder that said for Danielle on it. And she'd cut out news clippings of Japanese Americans who were using their own experience to fight for things like reparations, for closing detention centers and fighting the Muslim ban. And so it was really a moment of connection, I thought, with her, where she wanted me to see people like her who were using their stories and their experiences to fight for what they knew was right. And part of this work, I'm part of the Student for Solidarity's Redress and Reparations campaign. And I just wanted to read their little description because I think it really encapsulates why this work is important. As an ethnic group who has received an apology and reparations from the federal government for wrongs committed against us, Japanese Americans have a moral imperative to support Black people seeking a similar path for a structural remedy. So I really take that to heart, that there is a moral imperative, knowing that we have successfully campaigned for reparations. So in terms of that process for the JA community, it really started in the 60s and 70s and was inspired by the civil rights movement. So in 1979, there was the JACL, which is the Japanese American Citizens League, which started its own redress committee, which was focused on starting a commission. So there was a Senate bill introduced in 1979, and it was appointed in 1980, and then the report came out in 1983. And that report was a culmination of over 750 witnesses, 20 days of hearings. And I do want to show a short clip, so I'm going to share my screen. This is from Congressman Ron Dellums in his speech to Congress. So just bear with me as I set that up. And it's a very grainy video, so I'm not going to go full screen on that.
My home was in the middle of the block on Wood Street in West Oakland. On the corner was a small grocery store owned by Japanese people. My best friend was Rollins, a young Japanese child, same age. I will never forget, Mr. Chairman and members of this body, never forget, because the moment is burned indelibly upon this child's memory, 6 years of age. The day the 6x trucks came to pick up my friend. I would never forget the vision of fear in the eyes of Roland, my friend, and the pain of leaving home. My mother, as bright as she was, try as she may, could not explain to me why my friend was being taken away as he screamed not to go. And this 6-year-old black American child screamed back, "Don't take my friend." No one could help me understand that. No one, Mr. Chairman.
So I'm also going to drop a link to that full video in the chat box. I just wanted to play a short excerpt of that. But within the Japanese American community, we know that we owe so much to the civil rights movement, to Black allies in the space, and especially around the fight for reparations. Ron Dellum's words are pretty well known because it's such a powerful speech and a powerful moment of allyship. So I did want to share that. And so coming out of this Commission of Wartime Relocation and Internment, the full name is the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, also known as the CWRIC. The report that was published eventually ended up at the number of $20,000 to be awarded to each living survivor. That is about equivalent to $49,000 today if we're thinking of it in terms of purchasing power. It ended up getting paid out to 82,250 former detainees for a total of $1.6 billion. We should note, though, that Japanese Latin Americans have not been included with that, and they are still fighting for reparations today. So during the war, the American government actually took Japanese folks that were living in Latin America and relocated them to these incarceration camps in the US. And so those folks have not been part of the reparations campaign until this point. I did want to share a little bit about that internal process for what that was within the Japanese American community, because there were a couple of different perspectives on what they were due. There was one group called the National Council for Japanese American Redress, and they actually argued that survivors should be paid $15,000 and $15 per day in camp, which would approximately be $220,000 per person. And so you see like $220,000, and then we ultimately ended up at $20,000. So there's a pretty big discrepancy in that. And I think some of the conversation around that has been that it was important to have a higher figure there so that it made a figure like 20,000 seem much more reasonable. That's just an argument that's been made in the space. Obviously can't really speak to what is the right answer. There's not ever going to be a right answer for this. But the big thing that came with the reparations that the Japanese American community received was the redress. So they did get a formal apology from the US government. George W.H. Bush held a ceremony formally apologizing and presenting the 9 oldest survivors, the oldest living survivors, with checks. And then in terms of some of the policy that we've seen since then, there's actually been some funds that have been going towards preservation of some of the incarceration sites. Most recently in 2006, there were $38 million appropriated towards preservation, but we are still fighting to keep some of those sites alive. There's one site that they're threatening to build a fence around it. There's one they want to put an airport up instead. They want to put wind farms there. So there's still a lot of ongoing work to make sure that these stories and these spaces can remain intact for future generations. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the Japanese American process, because we know it's possible to get this. We know reparations and redress can happen because it happened for us. And so I think, like Suru for Solidarity says, we have a moral imperative to make sure that that's happening for other communities. And I think it's so important then for Japanese Americans especially, but other AAPI folks to really be involved in the fight for reparations, to be allies, to work in solidarity, to make sure that this is something we are pushing forward because we owe so much, not just in the reparations fight for JAs, but in terms of immigration and civil rights, we owe so much of that to Black leaders who really were forging that path that we've all benefited from. So I think that's all I've got to share on the Japanese American reparations and redress side. And at this point, would love to open this up to questions from our audience. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you have a question, you can feel free to either pop that in the chat box and I'll read it out loud, or if you would like to come off of mute, turn on your camera, you can also feel free to ask a question that way. And if not, I have some questions for you, Jean-Pierre. Okay, well, I'll get this started.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Danielle. Hi, Jean-Pierre, and everyone. This is Kelly Foster. Jean-Pierre, I've contacted you about reparations. It's good to see you. I have a comment. I mean, I do have a lot of questions, but for now, just a comment. In my research of reparations, yes, I have come across the payments that were sent to Japanese Americans. Also, however, a lot of Holocaust survivors were also granted cash payments from the German government, but also, and I did not know this until just recently, the United States had an agreement apparently with France that paid, I think several hundreds of $1 million to Holocaust survivors or their descendants who relocated to the United States. So the United States actually apparently made reparations in agreement with France to Holocaust survivors and their families who had relocated to the US. So when you take all that into account, there really is no reason why descendants of enslaved people should not be given reparations today. I mean, it's been done, and I mean, it really incenses me that it's been so many years, like several hundreds of years of damages done, and there have been like proven cases in the cases I just mentioned, and yet still nothing has happened. I do have a question though for you, Jean-Pierre. Is the Institute working with the NAACP and other groups as well to form like some kind of coalition?
Sure, great question. So yes, Kelly, yeah, I thank you for your emails, and I look forward to meeting with you further to discuss. And so yes, first Richard Smith from the NAACP New Jersey State Conference, who's the president of the New Jersey State Conference, is on our council. But as part of our Say the Word coalition, the NAACP is part of that coalition. So is ACLU New Jersey, so is New Jersey Policy Perspective, and many other organizations, including AAPI New Jersey, are part of our Say the Word coalition to have the New Jersey, legislature pass a bill to establish a task force here in New Jersey. Our Faith Allies are actually hosting a prayer breakfast tomorrow in Trenton with some legislators, and the Faith Allies are the engine of our larger Say the Word coalition. They're trying to organize a lobby day in May. And so, yes, the NAACP in New Jersey is part of our coalition. And I know in New York, the NJAACP of New York and their chapters were crucial to getting that task force bill passed. And I think, having conversation and thinking about how we can use the NAACP chapters in New Jersey will be helpful for getting this bill passed. But yes, they're certainly part of our coalition.
Okay, thanks. And also, there is another group that has been left out, I feel like, in this story, and that's Native Americans. And I have Native American heritage. And so what I'm wondering is where does reparations for Native Americans fall along this continuum?
Sure. So I don't see any of these efforts or operations as mutually exclusive, right? And one of my colleagues, Trevor Smith, who was with Liberation Ventures, is part of a new organization that is seeking reparations for both Black people in the U.S. and for Native Americans. His organization is called the Bliss Collective. They just launched, but we do have members of the Marabaco community on as part of our coalition here in New Jersey. I don't see those claims or those justice claims as mutually exclusive, or they can't engage in supportive work. We at the Institute, we're focused on reparations for slavery and for Black people, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be willing to support and organize with folks who are interested in seeking reparations for Native American communities here in New Jersey.
Okay, good, great. Yeah, I'm glad to know of that organization. I just jotted down the name.
Yeah, and I'll note too, I mean, it's so intertwined when you think about what the overarching forces are that have led to some of these needs. And even looking at Japanese American incarceration, my family was at Minidoka, which is in Idaho, on land that was stolen from the Native American reservation. Like they carved that out of what was already sort of their designated reservation. The government came in and like, let me take some more of that land, and we're going to put this
Exactly.
property here. So there are so
Yes.
many, interconnections along the way, and obviously it's so much more recent than I think a lot of folks realize.
Yes, Danielle, a lot of land, so much land was stolen from indigenous people, and so many of them were massacred and forced to leave their lands. And a lot of them were forced to relocate to these boarding schools where they were horribly abused and just had so many atrocities against them. Actually, there were a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but there were some enslaved people or recently enslaved people who partnered with indigenous people. And some of them, married and had children and whatnot. But yes, there's so much need for repairs for Native Americans also. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, thank you, Ina. Gila River was also on Native American land. Gila River is another incarceration camp.
Jean-Pierre, I was wondering, is there work by reparations task forces in other states that the New Jersey Council can borrow or take inspiration from? For example, in California?
Sure, yeah. So we are we are looking to California, we're looking to Evanston, we're looking to all over the Detroit and Asheville, and we're just looking to all the Boston, Atlanta. We're looking at around the country, and California is the farthest along, right? They're introducing legislation based on their task force recommendations that just recently introduced. And so we're looking to them, but I think we're trying to look at many different task forces around the country as possible to think about best practices. I'm in conversation with reparations advocates from around the country from some of these task forces, Kansas City, for example, as well. And I'm part of ongoing conversations to learn how are folks approaching this, how are they thinking about this, what kinds of remedies are they coming up with, and how can we draw from some of their learnings and ideas to really develop a robust final report and a set of recommendations in New Jersey. So yes, we're certainly looking at other places for sure, including California.
So we've got a question in the chat box from Bridget. Does this movement have particular champions in state or national legislature that we should support?
Yeah, I think so about that. I think in the New Jersey state legislature, it's some people mention Siobhan DeSumter, who's the primary sponsor. But I do think that you should, even if you should reach out to your legislator, your state legislature, your assembly person, your state senator, even if they already support the bill, if they're already co-sponsors, to let them know that you support a reparations task force, because legislators always want to hear from their constituents about specific bills that their constituent support, even if they're that way, they know that they're doing things. And I've always heard, back from different legislators that they do really take that to heart when they get phone calls or emails or other forms of communication, voicemails from their constituents about specific legislation. That really does, help shape their voting patterns and what bills they say forward. Also, at the national level, federal level, Cory Booker is our Jersey State Senator, where the senator from is the main sponsor of S40, which is the equivalent of HR 40, the House bill. Bonnie Watson Coleman here in New Jersey is also a supporter at the federal level for the federal legislation. But we've got, many 19 of the 20 members of the Legislative Caucus in the last session were Met supporters. We have also many non-Black legislators in the legislature who support the bill. We had many co-sponsors both in the Senate and the Assembly, including the co-chair of the committee in which the bill sits in the Assembly, Anthony Varelli. Teresa Ruiz in the Senate supports the bill. So we've got a lot of folks throughout the legislature who supported the bill, and Assemblywoman Jaffer, before she left, supported it as well. So we had a lot of folks, who were in support of this bill.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bridget. Jeff, I see your hand is raised.
Sorry I was a little bit late, and Danielle, I don't know if you covered this, but when the Japanese Americans were fighting for redress, for reparations, was there other things that they were asking for other than cash payments?
That is actually not something I have a deep knowledge of, so I don't want to share a wrong response on that one. But I can certainly look that up and get back.
Yeah, I was curious because I know that the work for reparations for slavery is encompassing a lot of different, things, cash payments being one of them. And I'm wondering if there's any, the work done in the past might inform sort of like a roadmap or the work happening now for slavery reparations.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to dig to see if there were any other policy elements that came out of that commission. Jean-Pierre, I have a question sort of tacking off of Bridget's about, who we're supporting in the legislature. But knowing that the task force is run by the Institute versus some of the other ones that are affiliated with their state or city governments, are there any benefits or obstacles you foresee in having this be born out of a nonprofit organization and coalition?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think we would still like the legislature to pass a task force bill, right? It's still the obligation of the New Jersey as a government to take responsibility for their actions and participation in the harms of slavery and its aftermath here in New Jersey. And so we still would like the state, and we don't see our work and the work that will come out of the New Jersey task force, legislative-led task force, as being redundant, right? They could both happen, and I think they both need to happen. I think, we can provide additional recommendations and insight to the potential New Jersey task force. We have a lot of experts on our council, both in academia and who are practitioners here in New Jersey. I think having a state-led task force, to have the resources of a state government, I think there's a facilitation where you can go from task force to proposing bills. And I think it demonstrates a level of will within the legislature when you have a task force. I think, here, by having a civil society organization lead a council, we still have to, get past the hurdle of having leadership support a task force, as opposed to places like New York and New Jersey, where leadership is on board and thinking about how to translate recommendations into concrete bills that then get that passed through the legislature. So I think we still have to take that next step here in New Jersey, even with our own council, but part of the work of the council it serves as a piece of public education to educate the broader public on the need for reparations, what is possible, about what reparations could look like in multiple different ways, in multiple different areas of life. And so that also generates public interest and then generates the kind of will needed for the legislature to do the right thing, and think about how they can now take up this work. And one of the things that we're going to have to do also is that we'll come up with recommendations, and those recommendations will have to then be translated into bills, and then folks will have to organize and get that passed through the legislature as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from our audience?
Yes, hi, Jean-Pierre. I know the focus is on New Jersey repairs, but is the council also focusing on the federal government as well? I think, as you know, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has tried for several years to get federal legislation passed, but she hasn't been able to get the votes for reparations legislation from both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, so last year, almost 1 year, this 1 year, it'll be 1 year this weekend. Ryan was on a panel with Sheila Jackson Lee and others in Selma about reparations and the need for Selma. And Sheila Jackson Lee took over from John Conyers to be, and the Institute is focused on New Jersey, but each, as part of their work and their research, each committee provides federal and national context. And the folks on the council understand that New Jersey is not, we're not focused on New Jersey in isolation. This is the purpose of Reparations New Jersey is yes for repair in New Jersey, but also as a step towards repair at the federal and national level. And so we are in conversation with national folks. The longtime reparations advocate Dreesen Heath, who is the organizer of the Why We Can't Wait Coalition, which is a national coalition to get HR 40 passed. She's worked with Cori Bush to have a resolution on reparations. She is on our Public Education and Narrative Committee. So we have folks who are thinking about reparations nationally and federally on our council. But yes, part of the work is to contextualize New Jersey with a federal background and with the understanding that reparations in New Jersey is not an end in itself, but as a path towards HR 40 and reparations nationally at the federal level. But there's work that needs to be done at the state level.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So the next thing I need to do is join.
Yes, yes.
Are there any last questions from our audience? Again, chat box, or feel free to come off mute or raise your hand. If not, I will ask a closing question then, Jean-Pierre. I would love to know how you see spaces for AAPIs or other communities to join in this fight.
Yeah, that's a great question. Solidarity and allyship is important in this work, and I think even some legislators and leadership, and I think from some of the broader public, they might try to dismiss reparations as an issue that is a Black issue, in the sense that it's just Black people who support this, and it's only one that concerns Black people, and therefore, the broader New Jersey public, it's not interested, and this is not a winning political issue or electoral issue. And I think there are several, responsive part of the role that folks from AAPI communities and other communities can play is to the earlier discussion, to give examples of how reparations was actually given is possible here in the United States, right? There are concrete examples of that, but also how this is not just a Black issue. Yes, it's an issue that is specifically of Black people, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect all people in New Jersey and the US, right? These are fundamental questions about how do we organize ourselves as a democracy? How do we think about the harms of the past shaping our current lives? And how do we think about moving forward? And these issues, slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, they have domino effects on other questions around immigration, what we talked about earlier, but also just about quality of life issues around things like environmental justice. A line that I like from, Bob Marley and his song, I got so much things to say right now is, he has this line that says, when the rain falls, it don't fall on one man's housetop, right? And he says, remember that, right? And so when harms come down to Black people, yes, those harms also have profound effects. When New Jersey has 506 municipalities, local control, the line, all these issues that emerge from the particularities of slavery in New Jersey and Jim Crow, those also have downstream effects on undermining the quality of life for many other people. And if you begin to address these issues through repair for Black people in New Jersey, it's also going to have profound effects on other communities. And so, yes, it's focusing on Black people and centering Black people, but doesn't mean that these issues don't have a role to play in other communities' lives. And also there is like a moral and ethical component. But I think having a diverse coalition, having allyship is important to any kind of coalition to show the broad base of support, to show legislators that there is a lot of folks involved and who are, part of this, and that to understand that we want to, the end part of the purpose of this is also to build a multiracial democracy. So I think, folks from AAPI community can, talk about these issues, hold events like this, call and contact the legislators, talk to their communities, give examples from the past, and show the links. I think that speech from the congressman was a profound, conversation about allyship. And I thought that was really making those links is how coalitions built, and then also how political movements are built as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jean-Pierre. And again, when we come together, different communities, we are so powerful. And I think that's obviously such a big reason of why they have tried to keep us apart, to try to keep us from having these moments of solidarity. They don't teach about that in school either, about, Yuri Kochiyama, Grace Lee Boggs, Larry Idleong. We're not taught about these figures that are really the base of intersectional movements, right? And so it's so important that we're bringing those stories to light, whether it's in schools and these events, and just making sure that these histories are known, that the work that we're doing together now in allyship, it's not new. We have a deep history of this type of collaboration, and it's so important that we carry that forward to really create that multiracial democracy. So thank you so much, Jean-Pierre, for joining us today. Thank you everyone who took time out of your lunches to come join us. I hope you had a informative conversation. If you have any questions, you can feel free to follow up with us. Advocacy@AAPI Montclair. Again, we did record this session, and it'll probably go out in the next newsletter when we put that in March. So thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great Monday and rest of your week.
Thank you. This has been really helpful and informative.